Okay, let me see here. There we go. There we go. Aha! Hi.
Hi.
Oh, Sarabeth. I'm so
Hey,
happy that you're doing this. I have to tell you, when I started seeing your posts, because we haven't seen each other in a while,
it's been a
and when
while.
I started seeing your posts, Ash and I both were just absolutely overjoyed. So thank you for your commitment um, to collective liberation. Thank you for speaking out. It is not the popular thing. And as you've pointed out many times in your posts, but I'm so
Same,
happy.
same. Yeah, it's so necessary and it's been so revealing and um jarring almost, like to see how few people are actually speaking out and like it just is I don't know, it just speaks volumes to on even just a societal level, like what we're facing here and how big it is if you know, people that I believe to be supportive of like collective liberation in person, right? Like people I practice yoga with and like think, have done coaching with and people I've followed for years who like have said nothing.
Well, who speak the language and have for all these years spoken the language, and yet in so many ways Palestine becomes a litmus test, right? This is what Palestinian activists have said for years, which I know you're aware of this, right? But this really draws a line for so many activists.
Yeah.
And I think it shows where people's loyalties are and why, right? It speaks volumes. Where you stand on Palestine really says a lot about your conviction, about your loyalties, about what's driving you. And I think, like you said, it's been jarring. I think it's been super disheartening, and that was one of the things, right? As you and I were corresponding back and forth, right? The question of, as we're awakening to and I know we need to get things rolling, but
No, 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 you're fine. You're totally fine.
as as we're awakening to this next layer of disillusionment. And Amanda Seals just posted about this, right? She said, I feel like I really got because I had trusted politicians, I had trusted leaders, I had trusted gurus, spiritual teachers, I had, right, all these people. And this has been yeah, it's been a shaking, um yeah, and a revealing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for speaking to
We'll
that.
talk about it. Yeah, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm
Yeah,
like so ready to just like let you, like I
dive
said,
in.
or like just pop off and dive in because you
Yeah,
have so much knowledge and wisdom. I think there is a difference in knowledge
go
and
ahead.
wisdom, you know? And I think you have such an incredible amount of both through your own lived experiences and through your studies as well. So it's already recording, and
Good.
people have just been kind of rolling in a little late over the last few
Totally
days.
fine.
Either way, everybody's going to get the recording, so we'll just get started. Um,
Beautiful.
and honestly, like all the sessions have kind of been rounding out to about an hour, so like no
Okay,
pressure to like speed through things.
good.
Like whatever flows through, please just allow it. I'm so grateful for your presence here, Paige,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah. It's so wild too that when we were in this space together, which is the stolen land of the Timucua people, right? To right, just naming that I live in a space in Florida that is
Yeah.
stolen land, that those of us who live in the so-called United States of America live on stolen land. And so just naming that. And you were
Yeah.
here at one point. We lived in the same place, and yet we during that time didn't have the opportunity to really delve into a lot of these things.
No,
And
of
I'm so
course not.
happy
And
to do that now.
yeah, same. And oh my gosh, like I have so much that I am feeling on that level being on Hawaiian lands.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God, there's
Yes.
internal conflict. And that's honestly something I kind of would love, I actually know very much would love to dive into with you at some
Yes.
point in this conversation is like white guilt,
Yes. Yes.
right? And
Absolutely.
and what we do with that.
Yes. 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 And how, right, like how do we do we face it in a way that is responsible?
Yep.
And there's a way in which, and this is an interesting thing, right? When we think about guilt, particularly for those of us who are white and who are a part of the dominant, right, the dominant class, the dominant race, and who are coming to terms with white supremacy culture. And we're watching Zionism in effect right now. We are
Yeah.
watching Zionism as a colonial project happening in Palestine right now, with
Yeah.
the ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people who are the indigenous people of Palestine, right? The thing about guilt that is so interesting, right, is that it actually can be productive if we know how to channel it. And I think this is why this becomes there's a really interesting intersection for you and I here, because for me, so much of the channeling or the using of this in a cathartic way or in a productive way, and for progress that is not sort of the white supremacist notion of progress as bigger and more, and right, but really sort of letting this be productive in a way that actually empowers us to do something, to use our voices, to use our privilege, and to amplify the voices of Palestinians, of indigenous people, of BIPOC. But you had asked that question, Sarabeth. What do we do with this? And let me say this before I go there, because I think story is so important. And you mentioned, right, the sort of naming knowledge as one thing and wisdom as another. The way that I understand wisdom is sort of embodied knowledge or understanding on a cellular level. And so
Yeah.
for me, I think it's important to name that, first, I'm white. I just want to say that, right? To
Yeah.
acknowledge that, and acknowledge that I, as a white person, was also raised in what we call the South of the so-called United States of America. I was raised in Florida in the Bible Belt, Southern Baptist. And so I was raised also within a very conservative, fundamentalist religious upbringing. And I'm navigating this, right, aware, interestingly, of my whiteness and also my Christianity in this space, and also the differentness of my gender and my sexuality from a very young age.
Yeah.
So a lot of the language that was being used, and here's sort of when I started to wake up when I was younger, still remaining in the closet, but started to wake up because I started to realize that the words that were being used for the Philistines in the Bible. So I'm going to try to do a lot of connections here.
Love that.
So the ways that the Philistines were being represented in the Bible by the people of Israel, who were represented as the people of God in the Bible. And I see this text as a narrative that has undergirded the colonial project. I'm going to try to go slow because there's a lot of information here. So right, if there's anybody you're like, what the fuck, because that will happen. I'm neuroatypical, so there are times that I'm gonna, okay. So I was trying to look at these words that were being used and realizing that the Bible was used to both justify slavery and deployed for the purposes of emancipation, right? I'm realizing that it's used to justify sexism. And I'm also seeing that there are women in the text that are empowered in various ways, right? So I'm like, this text is really sort of, if I am I at liberty to curse,
Please.
this text is really fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's super ambivalent, but going back to what I was originally saying, I was noticing the words that were being used to describe to the enemies of the people of God were also the words that were being used to describe the people like me who were queer, right? Deviant, depraved, diabolical, demonic, right? All these words, savage,
Yes.
savage. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm going, holy shit. I'm like, oh man, it's not the same. And it is. It is not entirely the same, and yet there is the same machinations, the same ideology, the same xenophobia, right? Is at the heart of all this discrimination. And so it was when I was younger, I was like, whoa, right? Like I was starting to see right, I was standing on the outside of this machine while inside this machine, which I think is the only way that we have any sort of power to affect change, is if we can stand outside the machine, right, and see it for what it is outside these systems of oppression. But we have to understand, when you talk about collective liberation, and I haven't been able to attend the previous one, so this has probably already been a theme. I apologize, but right, we begin to see that this same thread, right, that is what we are all up against.
Yes.
And so for me, right, so for me to realize that while I was not Black, while I was not brown, while I was not Palestinian, while I was not an immigrant, while I was not impoverished, while I was not right, I am, which becomes a really powerful phrase, because I am is in fact the name that is that the divine gives themselves, right, in the Hebrew text, in the Torah. I am, which for you is going to be really powerful too, right? When we think about this notion of being, right? It's not I am this or I am that. It is simply I am. And so to be able to see sort of this connection in my difference, in your difference, in their difference, and realizing that if we're all up against the same system, because this is what the enslavers did, right? With the sharecroppers, right? It was during the construction of whiteness, right? This idea that rather than have all of these lower class people, Black and white, band together, let's create this thing that is a race, right? And it goes back even further than that. We can talk about the social construction, which was political and theological, right? And they're also, Linnaeus sought to create a biological justification for this taxonomy of races, where whiteness is the beginning. But if we think about it in a theological sense, right? And maybe I'll take a breath after this, but if we think about it in theology, this is all sort of entwined.
Yeah, bring it home.
This idea of whiteness. So while I was here in church, right, whiteness and purity and dominance. And Mary Daly once said, if you make God a man, you make man God. And my revision on that is, if you make God a white man, you make white man God. And that is the colonial endeavor. And this is how we see sort of the collusion of colonialism, Christianity, and also I would say capitalism as well. Right. But this is where this thrust of like purity and whiteness and superiority and right, that binary thinking, that we see coming out of sort of this Western European epistemological, and it's a hegemony, right? This idea that, right, like that there is right and wrong, that there is white and Black or other, right? And on and on and on, that binary thinking. But I saw myself on the underside, even though I was white, even as I was white, right? So it was this sort of, I'm in this like freighted space, like both and where was my loyalty? Going back to what we were talking about originally, like we're seeing people's loyalties come out right now in what's happening in Palestine in the midst of this genocide, right? Is where was my loyalty? Was my loyalty to my whiteness? Because, right, there are so many people who, right, their whiteness, they feel like protects them. It gives them power.
Absolutely.
But I couldn't feed into that, because I was simultaneously being oppressed and gaslit by the gospel, right? I was being fragmented, I was being fractured, I was being taught to hate myself and to trust this white God that also, when I think about Foucault's panopticon, this white God that was actually living inside my head, terrorizing me. Do you know what I mean? Right? And so policing my actions, and leaving me in already in a space of guilt perpetually, right? And convincing me that I couldn't trust the divine that is me.
Right? Yes.
Right? Because oh man, I could just keep going, but
I know it.
well, no, I know, Sarabeth, but I do want this to be a conversation. I think the other place that I'm going though is I'm thinking about Jesus, and maybe I do want to actually add this, right? So there's a co-opting that happens. So when we think about the characteristics, or I would say the weapons of white supremacy culture,
Yeah.
right? Appropriation would be one of them.
Yes.
And so there's this really interesting thing that happens because, and I know you're familiar with this, and probably most of the viewers are as well, right? That Jesus, you've got Jesus, who is this absolutely like radical Palestinian who is anti-empire and is if you believe that Jesus walked the earth. I want to name that right now, right? Because we don't know for sure, and I want to say that, right? But whoever Jesus was, if there was in fact an historical Jesus, right? He was Palestinian, he was anti-imperial, and so he was in fact an insurrectionist who was speaking out against the Roman Empire, and simultaneously, this Jesus was living in the interstitial space, right? Living in between, because, right, Jesus was also speaking out against religion, which at the time religion was just sort of developing as something you could choose. Prior to that, right, it was cultural, right? Yeah. It wasn't religion, like whatever your spiritual practice was just a part of your culture and also your ethnicity. But at this time there's sort of like disentangling of the two. But so what becomes interesting is that the very empire that murders Jesus for his anti-imperial stance 300 years later appropriates the message of this man and this thing, and in fact utilizes it as a mechanism, as a tool of the empire itself, right? I mean, the great irony of the fact that if we actually like really studied and wanted to get at what Jesus was doing, it was the opposite of any of this white Christian nationalism bullshit. I mean, the exact opposite of it. But that's what empire does. That is the epitome of white supremacy culture, in the way that it colonizes, right? Colonizes bodies. And so it took the religion to utilize it as a tool, right? Because when you tell people they can only be saved by a God or something outside of them, you completely disempower them. And when you tell them, right, that evil resides within them and they cannot trust themselves, they're fragmented. They're disempowered, they're dehumanized. You're telling them they no longer have the capacity or the authority to be able to define themselves. And that is one of the most insidious and I think diabolical schemes ever. I mean, it is one of the most destructive things. And this is what has happened to Christianity, to this religion.
Go ahead. It's also what we're seeing happen in Israel right now.
Precisely. Yes. Yeah. Yes, it is what is happening, and that is exactly right. Is this sort of conflation now that's happened, right, in the Zionist project and now Christian Zionism, because this text has been utilized to justify this, right? We look at Genesis 12-14, Abraham, who in fact was not, who's also in the Quran, Ibrahim, but anyway, Abraham, who was not in fact indigenous to the land, he was a sojourner. He was traveling to the land. And by the way, and this is the thing too. So we talk about white supremacist culture, right? These characteristics. One of them is the worshiping of the written word, right? Worshiping of the intellect or reason over embodiment, over orality. These cultures that were writing these texts were oral cultures. In other words, they were not reading these texts literally. These texts were meant to be read allegorically. They were meant to be read figuratively. There was no literal reading of sacred texts like the Bible until you get, right, post-Enlightenment. And the whole reason that even happened, right, was in resistance to and response to what was happening with Darwin and the scientific revolution, right? All these Christians were like, holy shit, we got to find a way to keep it, right? Because in a lot of ways, Christianity was really helping to support, right, to undergird the colonial project. So it was like they had to find a way to keep this text legitimate. It had to be, right? So we can't, we have to be able to read this literally, and then we get the idea of 7 days of creation. But what you're saying, right? This idea of Christianity, the collusion of Christianity and so, and this is when it gets tricky too, because it's like, this is not actually a religious issue at all, but it's been crafted as such,
Yeah. Yeah.
very strategically.
And weaponized, like
Yeah. Yeah.
used
Yeah.
as a weapon. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, I mean, so I'm just, I think the other thing I was saying about oral cultures is this idea also of like civilizing the the savage,
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
savage or the barbarians, and you think about it, like how many cultures, and again these other sort of weapons of white Christian nationalism, but eradication and exploitation, and the ways that, right, so many of these beautiful cultures that actually could have taught us so much about the divine and honoring, right, they were our chance to actually prevent ecocide, and instead we've exploited the earth,
Mm-hmm.
right, by eradicating these beautiful cultures that understood how to commune with the divine in ways other than there is a God above, right? Even this idea, right? There's a God above and we are below, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
just having a conversation with my mom. That reminds me, just yesterday, a conversation with my mom, and she said, "Sarabeth, you're supposed to be in this world, but not of it." Right? She's so like she takes
Oh,
the Bible so
oh
literally.
shit. I did not even know that. So my family's like that too, Sarah Beth. I didn't know they were your folks were still sort of entrenched, or your mom was super
Oh,
entrenched in that.
100%. And it's so and it's wild because like on a personal level, I relate with you to like the oppression that I've experienced, even though I'm white, right? Like my specific
As
trauma,
a, come on, come on.
right? Yeah, like my specific trauma was like I was sexually abused as a child, and because my family was this like super Catholic post World War II like American dream, I was told I was never to speak about it again. I still had to be around my abuser. I was never to talk about it. I was not allowed to testify, and my abuser did everything he could to discredit me and make it seem like I deserved it.
That's it.
Like, you know what I'm saying? So like
That's the mechanism. That's it
that's
right
it.
there that you were gonna
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. And for those of you following along who, and I had a bio for Paige that I didn't get to.
Oh.
It's okay, it's okay. But I guess I can now just so that people are like aware of who they're
Yeah,
listening
listening
to
to,
right now.
absolutely, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Paige Rawson, she, they, is a writer, speaker, life coach, and scholar of religion and philosophy, and an anti-racist episteme activist. Having recovered from religious fundamentalism and reparative therapy, Paige knows firsthand the trauma inflicted by the exclusivist ideologies and toxic theologies, including white Christian nationalism and Christian Zionism, which have been especially instrumental in the Western European colonial project and the genocide in Palestine. Their personal experience of discrimination and dehumanization motivated them to self-acceptance, personal healing, and social action, as well as the pursuit of MDiv and MA and PhD. Paige now focuses their energy on teaching, coaching, consulting, and counseling, educating people about the use and abuse of white privilege, empowering minoritized people to advocate for themselves, and encouraging solidarity among marginalized communities.
You did it. That was beautiful. It sounds even better
You're
when you read
beautiful.
it.
Dude.
But so much of it though, right? Okay, so this is good what you just said, right? So your trauma, and this is it, right? The ways that our trauma then compels us to healing. And you were talking about white guilt, right? And one of the things that in my process happened, and you may have wanted to move into a question. I'm going to say one thing.
Okay. No, yeah, please go
Is that
ahead.
okay?
Yeah, of course.
So what I started to realize, well, first of all, is the amount of self-loathing that I had ingested that was like alive in my body was so toxic that I got really sick, like so sick that I was hospitalized. I lost 70 pounds and was hospitalized. I had already, and I'm going to mention suicides, everyone. I think it's important to name this. The only reason that I did not commit suicide was the doctrine of hell. And so I have this really freighted relationship with the church because the very things, right, that were leading me to want to end my life, right, there was a way in which also these really fucked up doctrines that, interestingly, hell, the idea of hell thanatos is in fact pagan and is in the Bible and is completely appropriated from pagan mythology. So
Say
there's
that
not
again, the idea of what?
Thanatos. Oh, sorry. So when we look in pagan mythology, Hades, right? When we look at the underworld in pagan mythology, there's no in the Torah. So in the Hebrew, so we look at the Bible. There's the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, or the Tanakh, and then there's the New Testament. But what happens is, right, when we look in the Hebrew text, there is no mention of a hell, but we find that in the New Testament because right through Hellenization, there's the influence of Greek mythology on Christianity. And so then this idea of hell becomes really productive, right?
Ah,
Got these, right? Because right prior to that, it's Sheol, everybody goes to one place, but come on, that's not going to motivate people. We need fear, right?
yeah.
Again, though, right? This the weapons of white Christian nationalism. We use fear in this way so then we can control and manipulate. And so then hell shows up, and actually the words for hell in Greek are taken right out of Greek mythology. But so that's what kept me alive. Then, right, I realize years later, and this is as I'm coming out, because I went through 5 years of reparative therapy, conversion therapy, and as I'm coming out, I'm like, fuck, I I'm going to have to learn to love myself because I'm going to continue to be sick and in pain. And this is when we talk about like some of what's happening right now during this awakening. People are getting sick, right? People are getting sick. They're those who are in right now, who are being dehumanized in Gaza, in the genocide, people who are Palestinians who have been displaced, who have migrated to various places, right? Also, people who are in solidarity with Palestinians, right? We are being affected on a visceral level. And that's what happens when we experience trauma. And I know you know this too, because I know you work with folks around trauma and healing. But for me, it was like, holy shit, I've got to learn to love myself. And so what happened was I got really clear that I've got to become conscious of what's going on. I have to get curious about these things, ask better questions. Who is this benefiting? What's going on? Right? Who's behind this? All the good, like, ideological questions. And then right, ask these questions of the systems. And then finally, compassion. Right? There has to be compassion for myself and for others in this process. And so I think that's the thing is it motivated me also to go and to study the Bible and to study religion and to study, right, to learn these languages and to think about systems of oppression, to study critical race theory, right, to study Africana, to study, I mean, queer theory and post-structuralist theory, and right, like how can I really get at this and then utilize talking about action, right? Language and action, from silence to transform it to language and action. Then how can I utilize that in a way that'll actually make a difference? Yeah, which I think is where you and I also meet in how, right, how am I healing from my trauma, but now also how am I dealing in the world? Yeah, which I want to talk a little bit more about that too, but maybe a little bit.
Yeah, that was really beautifully spoken. I just want to share some comments.
Yeah.
Enpa mentioned colonization of the spirit with what you were talking about
Oh,
before,
yes.
and said that makes me think about patriarchal takeover of the narrative about our reality.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Which is interesting because you saying that also makes me think about Paulo Freire, right? That first step is when I say, right, getting conscious, then getting curious, and getting compassion. It is, right, for Freire, the only hope that we have is conscientization, right? Is really getting aware of our reality beyond the narrative, right? Deconstructing those narratives and seeing how we have been bamboozled, right? Seeing the ways we've been hoodwinked, seeing the ways that right, that all of history has been whitewashed. It's been colonized, how we've been colonized. And so how do you decolonize the narrative? And how do you decolonize also like these power dynamics, relationships? How do you decolonize epistemology, so the ways that we think, the ways that we read, the ways that we learn, the ways that we live, the ways that we love, right? Because in so many ways, it's all the way down. Our colonization is all the way down, and it's devastating, and at the same time, it's fucking invigorating. And I think I want to say this. I want to say this, right, because I think this is important, because for me, that from the deconstruction, the reconstruction is not hard because I'm an Enneagram 8. And I think like, right, like I've evolved in the world, the way I've evolved in the world is knowing that I was other and like kind of getting jazzed about it. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like getting into a situation and knowing that I'm different than everybody else on the table and being like, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, but like, fuck yeah.
so I'm aware, like I'm a little aware. And I mean, and we've even sat at tables together, and at that table, I was like, oh, I'm liking this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I feel, and it's interesting because I mean, I feel like that's a thing though, right? Is like, can we have more difference at the table, please?
Mm.
Right, can we have more difference at the table, please? And so I know that I am, for such a time as this, I am here on this earth, and this is the thing that I'm called to do. And also there is an alternative to this where I'm not dysregulated all the time.
My God, right?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's and so I think when we're talking about the white guilt piece, one of the things that I was thinking about too, right, is the how necessary it is for us in our white fragility to come to terms with this kind of discomfort. Because, and I know you know this, right, one of those characteristics of white supremacy culture is that right to comfort, and think that
I've been thinking so much about that lately, and that's why nobody speaks out.
yeah,
Everybody's terrified of
yeah,
losing their privilege and their comfort.
yeah,
And
yeah,
Penpa spoke to that in our call yesterday when
yeah.
we went over her teachings.
I did see that. Yeah, no, I saw that like that it's going to require discomfort at 100%. And I would say especially white people getting uncomfortable, like
Yeah.
particularly us.
Yeah.
The thing is, this requires such an intense level of of maturity emotionally and intellectually, right? Like you think about it. So if defensiveness is I would put that right, like right at the top of the list of what I mean, not there that I have sort of a hierarchy of these characteristics of white supremacy culture, but I would put that right at the top because in a lot of ways, right, even if you look at the triangle of change, right, defensiveness is sort of that lowest level of cognition and functioning around emotion, right? Because you don't have the capacity yet. And this is right, it's a perceived threat. This is amygdala, right? It's operating out of fear, right? Perceived threat. So you're like, don't challenge my world. No, no, right? And it makes sense that that's where we go initially, right? But that's what the challenge is, and what has not been challenged is that we have to continue to grow. And so for those of us, and I'm thinking about Du Bois, right, like double consciousness, particularly like, and we think about code switching too. So within sort of, and this is true, I think, for a lot of Black people, but I think for BIPOC in general, right?
Did you say
There's
code
a way,
switching?
code switching. So being able, yes, so being able to like speak sort of the language of your own community, but then also having to speak the language of the white supremacist culture that is dominating in order to just fucking survive, right? And so that's the thing, is it's like it's I feel like in so many ways those of us who are othered in whatever are marginalized in all these in this way that we right, we not only understand the experience of a community that has been othered, right, but we've had to learn to understand the system in which we operate so as to navigate it in order to survive, right? And this is classic Audre Lorde, I feel like, you know. But the master's tools can't dismantle the master's house. And so it's like, how do I learn how to utilize these tools, but I can't do it the same way? Because in thinking about thinking with Frede, I should say, Paulo Freire, right? We have to understand our reality in a way so as to be able to analyze it and criticize it and grasp what it is, right? So that we do not continue to perpetuate the same power struggles, the same systems of oppression, right? And that's, I mean, that, you know, so many times Friday's come up during specifically this season, during this genocide, because, right, one of Friday's most famous points that he makes in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right, is that the oppressed will always become the oppressor.
I'm writing this down. Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Yeah. Oh, I'll show you the book because honestly, I keep it next to me. I'm straight up showing you this. I would recommend this to every single person that is listening, every single person in the entire world.
Great.
But I think, okay, yes, good. Pempa's on it. Okay. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. But that's just it, is that the oppressor, unless we experience conscientization, once we really get clear about the system of oppression that is in place, we will continue to oppress after we've been oppressed, because we only understand power dynamics as either or, right, wrong, over, under, right? Rather than understanding, and here's Foucault again, that power is diffuse and it comes from all directions, and we all have power. We all have power, right? This kind of binary thinking is absolutely one of the most debilitating things for us as a society, because it is limiting our capacity to understand humanity in all of its manifest diversity and beauty. And right, I mean, it's like we are absolutely, we're so limited. Anyway, hi.
More differences at the table.
Yes.
Mm.
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, everybody at the table. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any specific tools? So, because I feel myself, like you were talking briefly about like defensiveness, right?
Yes.
And how
Yes.
that's at the lowest level, so I deal with that myself, right? Because when I'm in actual conversations with people who don't have the same awareness I have, and even the
Yes.
people that are like, well, they bombed them first. This started on October 7th. And I'm like, this has been going on for 100 years. And they're like, no, it hasn't. When I start to feel
Yes.
that defensiveness
Yes.
rise,
Yes.
how do you personally deal with that?
Okay, good.
How do
No,
you
this
work
is
with
good. This
that?
is so good. Well, and it's really awesome. And I don't think Ash will mind, my partner will mind me talking about this, but
Ash,
this
I'm
is,
so glad you're here, by the way.
yeah, hey baby. But what's been really radical during this season, this has been a very depressing time and a very devastating time on multiple levels. And it has been so eye-opening, as we've already acknowledged. One of the things that has been really powerful is being able to walk through this, because so prior to this season, I have been an activist for, like, a pro-Palestinian activist. I have spoken for Palestinians and against this genocide, right? The settler colonialism of Israel and the IDF and what they're doing. Um, until now, a lot of people didn't understand, right?
Oh,
And so it's been really interesting, because I have been walking with Ashley in a lot of ways. I don't think she'll mind me saying this, through what I'm calling an awakening, but has been a devastating disillusionment for her, because in so many ways, right? I mean, with Biden and Harris, what's happened with them, right, and other politicians, Sanders, right, there have been, and also, right, even what old Brene Brown, like a lot of these folks that, right,
I
that,
know.
right, it took, like, also that typical liberal progressive white women are like, yeah, this is awesome, right? It's been really, it's it's been awful,
It is.
it's
It is.
to come face to face with this. And so talking about tools, first of all, what I want to say is the anger is justified, and the anger, in my opinion, is absolutely necessary, particularly for us to feel anger, right? I wouldn't say this for those who are on the overside of this equation, right? For those who are a part of, like, who are necessarily white, male, het, cis, and are very, very happy in their privilege and are really, really just soaking it in, resting on their laurels, right? I wouldn't say, right, because in a lot of ways, their anger has led to violence, right? And that has been an oppressive force. For those of us who are on the underside feeling anger, and even those who are white, het, cis, male, right, who are in solidarity with us, come on, right? But the anger at that, the anger is important because it's at injustice, right? The anger, in my opinion, is actually about dignity. And so the first thing that I would say is we have to understand the anger, right? And so this comes back to that, right? Like just getting conscious about it, getting curious, and getting compassionate. And I really do actually use those as steps in my own life, right? Like I'm like, oh, I'm aware of this shit coming up in me. I feel the heat, because the way it manifests for me, you're talking about, Sarabeth, The way it manifests for me is that I feel hot. And sometimes what's wild is as many words as I have to use, sometimes I just completely in that moment freeze. And that amygdala response, it's like I feel the threat and I'm like, oh. And so in that moment, right, getting conscious of what's coming up, getting curious about why, what's happening in this moment. And I really do believe that we can do this work, and I do this, but then giving myself compassion in that space, because I am feeling something that is so important. And in fact, the thing that I'm feeling has to be felt in order for there to be healing. Because in that moment, I am in solidarity with the oppressed. I am in solidarity with those who are being dehumanized. I am in, right? I am with them in energy. I am with them in body. I am with them in spirit, right? And I take courage in that connection, right? When we talk about collective liberation, we can also draw from the spirits of others, right? From those who likewise are in this struggle with us. And when we, right, another one of the great weapons of white supremacy and white Christian nationalism is, I believe, alienating us, isolating us, right? And this is a part of that gaslighting, even from our own selves, from our very souls, from our spirits, right? And so the biggest thing too is to lean in. So it was funny, I was talking to Ash about this. I was like, babe, what do you think if I think about like I see the real, I feel, I heal, and then I deal. Sorry. She was like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe keep working on that. No, but when I think about it, right, it's like, for me, that's what it is though, right? Like I allow myself to feel my feelings, and then I move myself into a space of healing, right? Sometimes that means I extricate myself entirely from that situation, but I also am thinking about somatic therapies, right? Like, what am I gonna, like, I need to let myself feel this all the way down, right? I need to heal through this, in which I know you can speak to this too, right? But then
100%.
what does it look like for me to deal? There's always the individual and the collective, right? There's always the individual and the collective. And so I'm thinking about feeling not just as, I'm going to feel this. And see, this is the thing, again, that isolation and alienation, this is a big thing. And in Christianity, right? It's, I have an individual relationship to God. Oh, collectivistic societies totally get it. We all are fucking connected to spirit, you know? So it's like, so the feeling is an individual thing, but it's also something that has to happen with other people. The healing, it also has to have both, and has to happen with others. So we do this together, whatever these exercises are, which you will be bringing us into, I know, this evening. Right. And then dealing, what are the actions that I can take? Because one of the biggest things is self-efficacy. So maybe, Sarabeth, when you're in that conversation with that person, what you know is right now, energetically, this person is not going to be able to receive what I have to say. And I have got to move myself out of this situation, because no matter what, and you know which who will listen, you know who's hungry, and you know who is absolutely uninterested, and in fact probably going to assault you if they haven't already in this process by trying to ask you a question or whatever. And that's the thing, is it's like, so how do we deal in ways that like feel manageable, that feel like this is something that I can do in my space, in this place, this is what I can speak, this is how I can live, this is right. And so moving ourselves out, and then being able to make those choices, whether that's on social media or right, or actually going to protests, and going to events, and you're holding events, right, connecting with the local Palestinian organizations or other organizations that are a part of radical movements in your area.
Yeah.
Radical revolutionary movements in your area.
Yeah. Yes. Amazing. And that is so regulating. There's a group that I am a part of that I just found through some different people on Instagram. Their Instagram tag is Healers for Justice. And right now they're mobilizing for Palestine. And just to be in a room with those people, just safe enough to have conversations about how we organize and how we, move forward in this, just to even be in those spaces with other people is so incredibly healing.
So good. I love to, I just want to point out that you said, and right now they're mobilizing for Palestine. in you saying that, you're making such a great point, right? Is again, when we think about collective liberation, whatever right now, our eyes are on Palestine. Right now, we're mobilizing Palestine. Right. So thinking about it in this way, right? A few years ago, it was Black Lives Matter. We're on the streets. We're taking the streets. We're doing, and that's just it. Is it's like we together are mobilizing according to the need at the time. In that, and I just needed to say that because I was like, yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of stuff floating around about, well, like, how dare you just speak on Palestine and not, everything else that's so awful in the world. And, people kind of try to take
Yes.
that like bypassy angle on it. And it's like, they need our attention right now, and never mind the fact that like our
It is
tax
urgent.
is absolutely urgent and we're the
Yes.
ones funding it.
That is exactly right. That is
Like,
exactly right. 100%.
it's bananas.
Yeah.
Are there any other teachers, authors, or anyone that you would suggest following, learning from, keeping up with in this process?
Yeah, absolutely. What I can do is I can send, I mean, you're probably aware of a lot of the folks that are on the ground in Gaza right now in Palestine. I can definitely share those links. What I would say, as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest things is really educating yourself by like actually doing the history, like doing the work of reading history. And so that's what I would suggest people do. I mean, aside from like Paulo Freire, I mentioned Audre Lorde before, but Rania is on right now. Rania, would you mind putting up, and I think Rania and I work together, and I know I'm calling you out, bud, but would you mind putting up just a couple of books or resources for people in the chat right now so they can see it? I'm hoping that she heard me and that she is listening. I have a feeling that she is. But yeah.
And anything you want to, I mean, if she isn't,
Yeah, 1 second. Okay, she's going. Thanks, buddy. Yeah.
I can also, anything in the follow-up email that I send out with the recording and everything, we can put resources in that email as well.
Perfect. Good. I love it. Awesome. Oh,
I didn't mean it. It was sweet.
is that a question or something? I don't know what happened.
She might have been like singing to her baby or something. It was really sweet. Whatever it
I
was,
love it.
or humming.
I mean, is there anything else that others want to? Well, you probably have other things you want to say, and I know that we have also.
Yeah, Penpa or Patrick, if there's anything that has come up for you that you want to ask, or any comments or questions that you want to bring up, you're more than welcome. Anybody, Rania, anything you have to add? Obviously, if you two work together, it's like I, would love to hear from you as well, and I'm sure our listeners would. Hi.
Hey.
So I wanted to ask about, like, this is something that I faced. Just a second, okay? Give me like 1 minute and I'll play, okay? About like, so it's that precise question, right? Like when we bring these conversations up to the white population, especially in my family, I feel it, is this like comfort and convenience. When it comes to that, then it gets blocked. It's like, I will fight for everything, but no, I cannot stop the investment, stock market. It's like everything stops at the money.
I know.
And the comfort and convenience part. And I feel like that's the part that feels like the most blocked for myself in my work and I'm like, the corruption of the sense organs are so deep. Jen, please. The sense organs, right? What we consume with our eyes, listen with our ears, eat with our mouth, wear with this. That's the corruption. The site of the corruption is at the sense organs.
Yes.
And not willing to go through a little bit of discomfort of restraining and feeling that internal void that like, why am I running towards consumerism, right? If I sit with that shadow, then it's like, wow, like what is the cost of my distraction? What is the cost of my escape into that?
Yes.
The whole world suffering is the cost of me escaping for a temporary
Relief.
coping. Yeah, exactly. It's I'm
Yes.
coping, but somebody's dying while I'm
Yeah.
coping.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, but it's like it's hard to get through. And I'm not really surrounded by very honest white family members also. They just feel super guilty, and I'm crying, and I'm like, I'm not guilting you, like I'm begging actually, like what do I need to do to move your heart? Like whatever you need me to do, I'll do it for the rest,
It's so, Pimpa, that is so, keep going. I don't want to stop you. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
but yes,
Yes,
yeah,
I'm
that's it.
totally with you. Well, and that's the thing is one of the things that I talk often to about with comrades, right, is that I feel like the only way for white people to get it is if they experience some form of marginality, like deeply. Are you with me? Like deeply, like on a visceral level, to the point of where you do get sick, right? Because that has the capacity, I think, to be able to transform the way that you're seeing the world, the way that you are experiencing the world, the way that you are, what you eat, right? I mean, and this is right why we're now why we're vegetarian, and this is why we think about the things that we're listening to, and this, right? But it's so true, and I have not found, and this is me being completely honest, I haven't found a way to get through other than that. And I
Yeah,
can't, and that's the thing is it's interesting too, because right, coercion is a part of white supremacy culture. It's a part of white Christian nationalism, that forcing of, right, you think about all of the masses who were converted, right, through Christianity and through the process of colonialism, right? And I know I can't force that on people, right? Because that's just perpetuating the problem. So it's like, what's the invitation, right? What's the,
exactly,
how do we get there? I'm
exactly.
so with you. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
and
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, it's like I feel one of the block is like white as a population,
Yes.
because of being at the top of the chain,
Yes.
but suffering so much inside, this lack of vulnerability to say, I too am suffering and I
Yeah.
actually need your help,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yes.
Because it's
Yes.
at the top, and it like, because all the comfort bubble is so that I can just float through life, not actually having
Absolutely.
touch and live, right? So
Yes.
it's like, how do we get white population to say, I'm in solidarity with the suffering world. I too am suffering. Let's do
Yes.
it together, right? There's kind of
Yes.
a projection of perfectionism, goddesses,
Yes.
kings, the queens, everybody
Yes.
wanted, not human enough to say
Yes.
we're all suffering. Actually, this system is oppressing me too.
Yes.
My body's in
Yes.
pain, my
Okay.
mind is in pain, everything is in pain.
Yes.
That
Yes.
admittance is not there to say I am suffering. It's almost like there's a guilt to admit, because the oppressive system says you should be the last person to complain about suffering because you're at the top, you benefit the most. And so we're like,
Mm,
no, we're all suffering. We must point it at the system and not think that
mm.
you are the system just because you
That,
benefit a bit from it.
it's interesting too, because the way that you're articulating it also is making me think about like what makes suffering legitimate. And so how there's almost a hierarchy of suffering then too, when you think about white guilt, because it's like, oh no, but my suffering isn't as bad as yours. So it's this weird sort of thing happening where you're not able to actually enter in fully because of the guilt. So the guilt is actually preventing you from being able to, oh, that's
Yeah,
wild.
because it's like also this dynamic happens in the oppressed population too. Like I would
Yes.
say, oh, I'm so marginalized, materially oppressed. But when I look at my privilege, I'm like set for cosmos.
Yeah.
I have a cosmic dharma that would take me to all the darkness, and I'll
Yeah.
not be, paranoid, panicking because everything is crumbling around me, right? There's
Yeah.
deep privilege, like deep karmic merit in that, right? If I acknowledge that, I don't feel resentful that you have more. And I'm actually feeling like, oh my God, you have no clue how trapped you are. You could do so much with what you got, right? It's a contentment part of it,
Yeah.
practicing contentment. And then, the
So,
privilege feels like the redemption for privilege is generosity.
mm,
It's like the scarcity, right?
yes.
Antidote for that.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, and it's interesting too, right? Because when we think about charity, white savior complex, right? That actually is a part of it. The thing that I'm thinking about, right, is so I have been doing this work for a while now. And one of the things that I struggle with so I do speak to white folks. So I have this whole thing of like being brave and how do you be brave? Like you have to listen and blah, blah, blah. I go through this whole thing. But it's interesting because I am finding myself, right? Like how do I speak to this population in a way that is going to open them to the tender heart, right? Because what I find, so, and this is what I was talking about earlier, right? There's this part of me that's like, yeah, I'm in your face, I'm gonna do that, right? It's like, okay, so as I am giving myself compassion, how can I, right? Because there's something going on for me too that is hating my whiteness, right? I mean, there's part that's how, oh my God, you're wrong.
So much, yeah.
So it's like in this process, right? Like, how do I have compassion for myself at that level? If I do, will I then be able to reach more people with my story so that others can hear it? So I'm with you. I'm so with you. Oh, it's good. It's so good.
How did you phrase that again? Speaking that to them to activate their tender heart. Is that what you said?
Yeah, their tender heart. Yeah, the tender heart of sadness.
Yeah.
It's like, because I feel like that's where we ultimately meet, and I really meet. And Pempa's, I think, addressing that, right? It's like that, like when Pempa talks about the suffering, right? Can we really talk about our suffering on this deep, 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 deep level so that we are able to acknowledge or validate each other's experience? And I think that's a thing with like this work as a white person talking to other white people, right? How do I activate, or how do I engage your tender heart in a way that is not going to like have your hackles up, right? And you are going to be more defensive, or you're going to stay in that place of guilt. Like, how do we meet each other in that? Yeah. So
I just started rereading Nonviolent Communication, and it was written in 1996.
Yes.
I completely forgot that in the opening chapter of this book, he writes down and shares an entire conversation between, a Jewish Israeli person and a Palestinian person. By the end of the conversation, the Israeli person was like, had I been able to have this conversation earlier, I would have completely relinquished my property in the West Bank to give back to them. And I'm like, this was in 1996. And it's just so, and just like you said, like to be able to just understand the feeling and the need that speaks to people's tenderness and sadness. And, it's so incredibly powerful. And yet at the same time, it's also so easy for us in our passion for standing up for the oppressor. I mean, standing up against the oppressor, right? For the oppressed. To feel dysregulated, to feel angry, to feel defensive. Yeah, so both and that,
Yeah. And so it's interesting, right? I think too, thinking about perfectionism, Pempe, you mentioned this too, right? But thinking about the ways that I was so hard on myself coming along, what the ways that I was conditioned to treat myself, to criticize myself, to loathe myself, to, right? It's like, if I can truly love, like on a deep, deep level, befriend and offer myself that kind of grace and that kind of nurturing, then, right, when I come into contact with these parts of myself, because a lot of times what it is I'm seeing these people and I'm seeing parts of myself that I hate. I mean, a lot of it is projection and abjection. And so, and I mean, even this is even what's happening, right? And what we see happening in the biblical text with what Israel is doing to the Philistines, right? They are villainizing the victims so that they can be the victor, so that they can be the chosen of God, so they can, right? And okay, I don't want to go into that. I was about to take another tangent. But that's the thing, is in that moment, can I, and this shit is hard, but can I see myself in you? Oh, you know what I mean? And can I love myself so much that I can reach out and touch that part of you, and actually from that place of true empathy and real tenderness connect. Oof. I'm still working on it. I'm still in the process. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. I
Same.
know it, and I'm knowing it. I'm coming to know it.
Yeah.
I'm coming to know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's good. It's good stuff. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Anything else? Anybody else have anything to say, add to?
I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Rawson. This was great. And thank you, Sarabeth. No, it's been great. And Penpa too. Good to see you again. And a lot of what we've been talking about just the last couple of days is like what we can do at the node level, like in our local community. And you gave us some amazing examples, especially around Palestine, and looking forward to reading the books. But I did have a question, just kind of given your experience, and thanks, Sarabeth, for sharing yours today too. Like I was also raised in the Roman Catholic Church, but my folks left the church when I was about 10. So for us growing up as kids, like it was a lot easier, because like we pulled out early enough that like, I didn't learn much early on, and I think that a lot of like what my folks they were both raised Roman Catholic, and I'm sure that a lot of that belief system, the guilt, like some of that stuff that was in them was still present in my childhood. Don't get me wrong. I just wasn't getting it in church. And for us growing up, it was easy to be like, I was still at that age where you look to your parents and you're like, mom and dad know everything, and if they were able to say like, no, even though our families believe this and this is what they do, like it's important enough for us. We're not, this isn't for us and we're going to leave. Like it was pretty easy for us to make that decision as kids. I mean, it was kind of made for us and I'm pretty grateful for that. But I guess my question is, I still have like a lot of my extended family, as well as like my grandmother, like people that I want to have relationships with. Like it's the same type of conversation that I feel like Sarah Beth was just having, like with her mother, and like, I know. And like, I guess my question is, like on, I guess just like on that more local level, like what can we do to like relate or meet these people with love, but like also, I guess stand my ground. Like a lot of the times it's just like I'm just getting that judgment or like, are you confirmed? Are you that? And it's like they know I'm not, but yeah, I guess that's my question.
So thank you so much for sharing your experience. The way that I see it is, and this is not an answer, this is more just joining the conversation with you. The way that I looked at my life and my social circles is in terms of concentric circles. And this is going to sound really wild. So I'm going to speak to specifically your question in this way. So there are people so the inner circle is me, right? There are people that I let into my inner circle who I know were here. And then I put my family and folks from my past to varying degrees outside, right? And it just radiates beyond. And so there are certain people, and I would put my parents probably around the fourth level, unfortunately. I love them so much, but I know that we've had to call a moratorium on any conversations around religion.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me to be in their presence and to actually try to engage, it actually creates too much tension and too much stress for me, in fact, physically. And so I have really had to determine where I need to meet them. But like my sister and brother-in-law, for instance, I can have more of those conversations with. I can push them a little more, ask them more questions. And so for me, so I put them like around a 3, what I mean?
Yeah,
It
no,
sounds kind of funny
absolutely.
but literally, so but that's kind of how I do it. And it's why it sounds really strategic, but I think it's more just not, I don't want to call it self-preservation, but maybe self-care, an effort of self-love, to kind of walk into a situation and determine where do I meet you, right? How much of myself can I offer to you? How much of my energy can I?
Right.
And I'm sure you probably are doing the same thing, sort of navigating with your family. But I have had to grieve certain relationships because for me, like I love my dad
Mm-hmm.
so much, and oh my God, if I could just, and there are moments too, like if we don't drink that much anymore. I've kind of just set this stuff away from that for various reasons, but sometimes we'll have a beer together And in those moments, he will just, and Pemba, this kind of speaks to what you're saying. He'll just, I mean, he will get so real and raw and talk about his shame and talk about his guilt. And in those moments, I know it's like, okay, I see a little opening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I mean, and you can share more of your experience, but I think that's just it. I've learned how to navigate the world, sort of being able to read where people are, even the ones that I love so much, to know how much can I open to you and what kind of relationship on what layer are we going to really be able to operate. So it's painful though. I mean, there's
Yeah, no, but I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that I've just naturally done some of that myself, but I really like the visual of the different circles, and
yeah,
just kind of a moment of clarity I had right there listening to you speak, was that by setting those boundaries and kind of having that space, like for example, like where, like your dad's still in your life because of that, because you've set that there, and then you can have those moments where he has that beer and you're connecting. It's like, and there's always still, time and hope. And no, that was beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And thank you for today.
absolutely. It's interesting, right? Because I think there are levels of estrangement, right? There are different ways that we can choose to, and sometimes, right, for some people, it's like, I need to get you completely out of my life. But I thankfully am really committed to, I mean, daily I wake up and, Sarah, you were talking about sort of what are my tools. Like for me, it's meditation, affirmations, gratitude. I do mindful movement. I make sure I'm outside and I get meaningful interactions with people. And it's like every single day I will get up early enough to be able to do this, right? But it's like, because I'm so committed to doing that work, it enables me to be able to create those kind of boundaries and maintain a relationship with him, and not also get activated or get triggered when he says certain things, or to know how to operate with him. But yeah, yeah, it has given me the opportunity to be able to have those special moments with them. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Patrick. Thank you for bringing that up. It was a nice visualization too, Paige, for sure. It kind of reminded me of how Glennon Doyle talked about like their relationship when she first came out, and she was like, "This is my island, and like
Yeah,
not
yeah,
allowed on my island."
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's so
oh,
true. It's so
oh,
true. You got to do what you got to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so if there's nothing else that we want to discuss, and honestly, Paige, I feel like we could just go on forever
I
and
know.
it would be amazing. And I'm just so, so thankful for your energy and your knowledge and your wisdom and your embodied knowledge and your guidance. And
Appreciate you.
yeah, and just how you're showing up. Seriously, it's just such a light, and all of you here. I'm gonna guide us if we're okay with it. Just a like 3 to 5 minute little meditation. I think what we were talking about kind of brought this up to me, and this is a tool I use for my own compassionate inquiry. And it's not so much about the story, right? But just witnessing with compassion this sensation of like what we're feeling and the invitation of that compassion into it. So if that feels okay, we'll go ahead and just take a couple minutes to drop into that. And so if you want to just sit back and take maybe your fullest breath of the entire day to just clear it all out, so filling all the way up. And sigh through the mouth. And just kind of feel your awareness drop down a layer deeper as you do that. And then consciously breathing, witnessing your breath enter your body and fill you up with fresh life force energy. And slowly exhaling and releasing. Just start to feel your body relax a little more deeply. Your shoulders drop down and all the muscles in the face soften. Drawing your awareness to the space between the eyebrows and finding a spaciousness within. And then bringing awareness to your heart center and also finding a spaciousness there. And now to your root, finding a spaciousness there. Just feeling like an open channel. And now, as you're here, I'd like for you to recall a moment of discord or conflict or frustration, defensiveness, anything that happened recently where you felt that sensation come up in your body, that block. Notice where you feel it. And as you just witness it, invite it here fully. Thank it for its presence and its wisdom that it is offering you. And you can speak directly to it, telling that part of you that you are here to witness and hold it. And now as you sit with that, just notice if it had a color and a shape, what color and shape would it be? Notice if it's moving or if it's still. Notice if it's heavy or light. And if you could reach out and touch it, what temperature and texture would it be? And if it wanted to move in any way, if it wanted to express in any way, what would it want to do? Now, I'd like for you to notice, you can say to yourself, right, I am witnessing this sensation in whatever location you feel it. You can say, I'm aware of that, right? So where is what's witnessing it? Where is the part of you, that I that is perceiving it? Where is the location of your individual awareness of that? Where are you noticing that? Notice the shape and the size and the color of your individual awareness of what's perceiving that other part of you. Is it moving or is it still? Does it have a texture or a temperature? Is it light? And taking it even farther beyond that, now notice what you perceive when you bring to mind all of awareness. When you drop into the sensation and expand into all awareness. Compassionate, all-knowing awareness. What is that like? What color, texture? What does it have? What qualities? Now, I'd like for you to ask your individual awareness if it is willing to receive the invitation to let all compassionate, all-knowing awareness in to merge with your individual awareness, and just notice what happens to the color, shape, size, sensation, qualities of your own individual awareness as it merges with all awareness. And now checking in with that first part that you witnessed in your sensation of frustration, wherever the location is that is, check in with that part and ask if it's willing to receive the invitation to merge fully with your individual awareness and all compassionate awareness. And as it lets those in, what changes about the sensation qualities of what you're feeling? How does it move? What does it do? And if you'd like to place your hands on whatever part of your body that you're connecting to most in this moment, you can go ahead and do that and just breathe into those spaces. And just resting in compassionate awareness without judgment. with a full sense of trust in your inner knowing and your belonging, in your activism, in whatever way that shows up. And taking another big breath together, filling all the way up and feeling your breath reach the back of your throat and the crown of your head. And releasing to feel your human body in this moment. Yes. You're welcome to open your eyes whenever you're ready. Paige, you're
I
smiling.
miss you, Sarabeth.
Miss you too.
I missed your flesh.
Unfortunately, the biggest virtual hug.
Yeah.
So grateful. So
Yeah.
grateful for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all of you for being here, and to anybody listening at home later. Thank you for your effort, your participation, your energy. Stay in touch. Next time you guys come to Hawaii, you better come see me.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And when you're back here, hopefully someday.
Yeah, I mean, probably not till the fall, but yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, y'all. Take
All
care.
right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.